Every great story begins in the shadows of longing, and Jacob's journey begins not with triumph, but with silence in the womb of Rebekah. For 2 decades she bore the weight of barrenness, an affliction that in the ancient world was more than personal grief. It was seen as a curse, a mark of disfavor, a fracture in the promise that Abraham's line would flourish like the stars. Isaac prayed, and the silence finally broke. Life stirred where there had been only emptiness, but with life came struggle. The twins wrestled inside her, as if even before birth they sensed destiny was too small to hold them both in peace. Rebekah, confused and distressed, sought the Lord, and the answer was both prophecy and paradox. 2 nations are in your womb. One shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. In a culture where the firstborn's rights were unquestioned, this word shattered expectation. From the very beginning, Jacob's story was one of reversal, where divine intention confounded human order. The birth itself was charged with symbolism. Esau, ruddy and hairy, emerged first, a man of the field, even in appearance. His brother followed immediately, clutching Esau's heel, as if unwilling to release his rival to destiny's lead. He was named Jacob, heel grabber, a name that foreshadowed his cunning, his grasping spirit, his restless determination. Isaac was 60 years old, late in life to begin raising children, but at last the promise had bodies, voices, and futures. The contrast between the boys sharpened with time. Esau grew into a hunter, skilled in the open fields, embodying the rugged strength admired by his father. Jacob preferred the tents, a quieter life of calculation and patience, a temperament more aligned with his mother. In this divergence lay the seeds of favoritism. Isaac loved Esau for the wild game he brought, while Rebekah favored Jacob, perhaps remembering the oracle that he would rule over his brother. What began as parental preference fermented into division, a subtle fracture in the family's foundation. The scriptures do not sanitize this dynamic. Instead, they expose the raw edges of human nature, love divided, loyalty split, and destiny shadowed by jealousy. The text whispers a warning to every parent and leader that favoritism, even when rooted in affection, can birth rivalry with consequences that span generations. This is not merely a family drama. It is a lesson etched into sacred history. As the boys matured, the stage was set for a pivotal moment. Esau, driven by appetite, returned one day from the fields exhausted, his body crying out for sustenance. Jacob, ever watchful, stirred a pot of lentil stew, red and fragrant. Hunger met opportunity, and words were exchanged that would echo for centuries. "Give me some of that stew," Esau demanded. Jacob's reply was swift, sharp, calculated. "Sell me your birthright." Here the tension between impulse and foresight, appetite and covenant, becomes unmistakable. The birthright was no trivial matter. It carried not only material inheritance but spiritual authority, the weight of leading the family and inheriting the covenant promises given to Abraham. Esau, exasperated and melodramatic, cried, "I am about to die. What good is the birthright to me?" His hunger clouded his vision. The future seemed worthless when the present screamed so loudly. Jacob pressed, Esau swore, and for a bowl of stew the sacred inheritance was traded. The Bible's brevity in narrating this exchange is striking. Esau ate, drank, and walked away. No thunderclap, no visible consequence, only a casual dismissal that the text brands with eternal significance. Thus Esau despised his birthright. What seemed small became monumental, for it revealed character. Esau was careless with destiny. Jacob was relentless in pursuit of it. One squandered, the other schemed. This episode is more than family bargaining. It is the unveiling of human weakness and human ambition. Esau embodied the danger of living only for the present, blind to the covenantal thread binding past, present, and future. Jacob embodied the danger and possibility of ambition, unchecked by principle. Both brothers faltered, yet through their flaws God's purpose moved forward. The stew simmered long after the meal was gone. It became a symbol of short-sightedness and shrewdness, of the tension between appetite and calling. From this moment forward, Jacob's life would be defined by striving for blessing, for security, for love, for survival. Esau's path, shaped by loss and bitterness, would shadow him. And the family, fractured by favoritism and deceit, would stagger under the weight of choices made in hunger and haste. Jacob's story begins not with purity, but with grasping hands and calculated bargains. It begins with a reminder that divine plans often unfold through imperfect vessels. And it begins with a warning whispered across time: what we despise in moments of weakness may shape generations to come. The stew has been eaten, the oath has been sworn, but the consequences are only beginning to simmer. Soon, The hunger for blessing will prove even greater than the hunger for food, and the family's fragile bonds will be stretched to their breaking point. The meal between Jacob and Esau seemed, on the surface, almost trivial. A pot of lentil stew exchanged for a birthright. Yet that single transaction exposed the fault lines running through their family and their souls. Esau had returned from the hunt, his body aching, his lips cracked with thirst. The wild country shaped him into a man of instinct and appetite, but it also left him vulnerable when fatigue gnawed at his strength. Jacob, waiting by the fire, did not simply cook for himself. He prepared an opportunity. "Give me some of that red stew," Esau demanded. The Hebrew text plays on this phrase, linking Esau with the name Edom, red. Hunger branded him with a new identity. Jacob's reply was quick, almost rehearsed. "Sell me your birthright first." It was not kindness, but calculation. He knew what the birthright meant: the headship of the clan, the double portion of inheritance, and above all, the covenant blessing passed from Abraham to Isaac. Esau's response dripped with exaggeration. "I am about to die. What use is a birthright to me?" His words revealed a man ruled by appetite. Death was not at the door, only hunger, but Esau framed his need as ultimate. He swore the oath, sealed the trade, and consumed his bread and stew. He rose and left as if nothing of weight had passed between them. Scripture closes the scene with a single indictment: so Esau despised his birthright. This contempt was not simply carelessness. It was a rejection of sacred responsibility. In the culture of the patriarchs, the birthright was no mere property claim. It was the channel through which God's promises would flow, the promises of land, descendants, and blessing to all nations. Esau treated eternal inheritance as no more valuable than a hot meal. His choice reflects a deeper truth about human frailty. When faced with immediate desire, eternal realities often seem abstract and disposable. Jacob, meanwhile, emerges from this episode with both cunning and culpability. He seized his brother's weakness, pressing advantage without mercy. His bargain revealed a mind sharpened for strategy, a heart restless for blessing, but also a spirit willing to manipulate. In Jacob we see the paradox that threads his life: ambition that propels him toward destiny, yet methods that stain the path with deceit. The symbolism of the red stew lingers. Red, the color of Esau's skin at birth, the color of blood, the sign of appetite and impulse, becomes the marker of short-sightedness. Esau's name, Edom, carries this legacy, reminding us that nations can be defined by the choices of a single moment. Jacob's name, heel grabber, likewise shadows him, a reminder of striving and grasping that will follow him into every conflict. Yet in this seemingly ordinary exchange, God's prophecy begins to take shape. The younger supplants the older, not yet through open conquest, but through shrewd negotiation. What looked like family drama was, in truth, the unfolding of divine intention. The covenant line narrowed, not because Jacob was righteous, but because God's design bends even human schemes into his plan. History echoes with similar warnings. The Roman satirist once mocked those who sell their birthright for a dinner, and countless lives have been undone by yielding the eternal to satisfy the momentary. The stew and the birthright stand as an eternal contrast: appetite versus inheritance, the now versus the not yet. For Jacob, however, the acquisition of the birthright was only the beginning. He had secured the right, but not yet the blessing. In patriarchal culture, the spoken blessing of the father carried prophetic weight. It confirmed and sealed the birthright in a way no barter could. Jacob had maneuvered for position, but destiny would demand more. He would need to deceive not just a brother exhausted from hunting, but a father nearing the end of life. The household itself ripened with tension. Isaac still favored Esau, blind to the transaction of stew or unwilling to honor it. Rebekah, remembering God's oracle, watched and waited. The rivalry between the twins was no longer just sibling competition. It was now a contest of inheritance, prophecy, and survival. The stage was set for deception far greater than a kitchen bargain. Thus, what began with a bowl of red stew widened into a chasm that would divide brothers, shake a family, and set in motion a drama that shaped nations. Jacob grasped, Esau despised, and the promise of God advanced through human weakness. The fire that cooked lentils would soon ignite an even greater scheme. The stew was but a prelude. Ahead lay the moment when a blind father would touch, listen, hesitate, and finally bless a son cloaked in another's name. The stakes would rise, the cost would deepen, and Jacob's cunning would reach its perilous height. The passing of years brought Isaac to the twilight of his life. His sight dimmed until the world around him became little more than shadows, but his desire to bestow blessing burned bright. In patriarchal culture, A father's blessing was not a casual benediction. It was a prophetic act, binding and irreversible, believed to carry divine weight. For Isaac, the blessing meant passing the covenantal torch, sealing the destiny of the chosen heir. Despite Esau's reckless sale of the birthright, Isaac's heart still leaned toward his firstborn. The father's appetite mirrored the son's strength, and the bond of venison suppers seemed to outweigh spiritual memory. One day Isaac summoned Esau. "My son," he said, his voice trembling with age. Esau answered eagerly. Isaac confessed, "I am old, and I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, go out to the open country, and hunt game for me. Prepare me the kind of food I love, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." It was a simple request, yet it would trigger one of the most dramatic deceptions in Scripture. Rebekah overheard, her heart quickening. She remembered God's words during her troubled pregnancy that the older would serve the younger. She could not stand by while Isaac, blind to prophecy, sought to favor Esau. Driven by conviction, favoritism, and perhaps her own shrewdness, she devised a plan. She instructed Jacob to fetch 2 young goats so she could prepare a meal that mimicked Esau's cooking. Jacob hesitated, not because conscience pricked him, but because fear whispered of discovery. "What if father touches me? He will know I am not Esau. I will bring upon myself a curse, not a blessing." Rebekah silenced his fears. "Let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do as I say." The scheme took form. Rebekah dressed Jacob in Esau's best clothes, garments carrying the scent of the field. She covered Jacob's smooth hands and neck with goatskins to mimic Esau's coarse hair. Then she placed the food in Jacob's hands, sending him to stand before the man whose eyes were blind, but whose memory was sharp. The encounter drips with tension. "My father," Jacob said softly. "Who are you, my son?" Isaac asked, suspicion already rising. "I am Esau, your firstborn," Jacob lied, layering deception upon deception. He urged Isaac to eat quickly, so the blessing might be spoken. Isaac, startled at the speed of the hunt, questioned, "How did you find it so quickly?" Jacob dared to invoke God himself, "Because the Lord your God gave me success." Yet Isaac wavered. "Come near, so I may touch you, my son, to know whether you are really Esau or not." Jacob stepped forward. The old man's hands felt the rough skins, the texture resembling Esau. But his ears caught the difference. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. For a moment, truth and deception collided in Isaac's senses. The blindness of his eyes was mirrored in the blindness of his judgment. Trusting touch over hearing, Isaac surrendered and ate. Then came the blessing, irrevocable and rich with promise. "May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." With these words, Isaac unknowingly confirmed the ancient oracle. The younger rose above the elder. No sooner had Jacob departed than Esau returned, his game prepared, his heart eager. "Father, sit up and eat, that you may bless me," he said. Horror washed over Isaac. Trembling violently, he asked, "Who is it, then, that hunted game and brought it to me? I blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed." The truth struck Esau like a spear. His cry pierced the tent, "Bless me also, my father." Isaac's reply was unyielding. The blessing, once given, could not be revoked. Esau wept aloud, his sobs filling the air with bitterness. In anguish he pleaded again, and Isaac managed only a secondary word. "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword and serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck." A life of struggle was his inheritance, a prophecy of hardship, yet tinged with the hope of eventual freedom. Esau's grief hardened into fury. "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." His words carried the weight of vengeance, and Rebekah once again intervened. She urged Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Haran until Esau's rage cooled. The deception that secured the blessing now drove Jacob from his home, severing him from family and land. The blessing that Jacob received was genuine, but it carried irony. He had obtained it through trickery, yet it would not bring him immediate peace. Instead, it thrust him into exile, pursued by his brother's wrath, estranged from his father, reliant only on the God whose name he had invoked in deceit. His cunning gained him the inheritance, but it also forced him onto the long road where his faith would be tested and transformed. Thus ends the household drama, a blind father deceived, a favored son supplanted, a grieving brother enraged, and a mother orchestrating destiny at the cost of family unity. What began with a bowl of stew escalated into a stolen blessing, and what was stolen now bound Jacob to a journey he could not yet imagine. Jacob fled from Beersheba under the weight of his brother's wrath and the echo of his mother's urgency. He was no longer the calculating younger son trading stew for birthrights in the comfort of home. Now he was a fugitive, a solitary figure leaving behind everything familiar: his blind father, his grieving brother, his mother's scheming protection. Every step toward Haran was a step into uncertainty, and every mile stretched the gap between what he had grasped and what he might yet lose. As the sun sank and shadows consumed the horizon, Jacob stopped in an unremarkable place to rest. With no tent, no servants, no family, only the cloak on his back, he chose a stone for a pillow. It was the image of exile, lonely, vulnerable, stripped of security. Yet it was there, in the hardness of that night, that heaven stooped to meet him. Sleep closed his weary eyes, and in his dream a vision erupted. A stairway or ladder, planted on earth, reaching into heaven, and angels ascending and descending upon it. Above the stairway stood the Lord himself. The words Jacob heard changed the direction of his life. "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, spreading west and east, north and south. Through you and your offspring all peoples on earth will be blessed. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised." This was no vague dream. It was a direct reaffirmation of the covenant made with Abraham and renewed through Isaac, now passed to Jacob. Though Jacob had lied, deceived, and run for his life, God's word did not falter. The latter revealed a bridge between heaven and earth, a symbol that God's purposes spanned both realms, and that Jacob's story was more than a tangle of human schemes. Jacob awoke trembling, his heart struck with awe. "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." At dawn he took the stone that had been his pillow, set it upright as a pillar, and poured oil upon it. He named the place Bethel, house of God, though its earlier name was Luz. For the first time, Jacob's faith took personal form. No longer merely the God of Abraham or Isaac, the Lord was becoming Jacob's own God. He made a vow, cautious yet sincere: "If God will be with me, and will keep me on this journey, and give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I have set as a pillar, shall be God's house, and of all that you give me I will surely give a tenth to you." His words were not yet the surrender of a saint, but the beginning of a pilgrim's faith, conditional, yes, but binding. It was the first step of transformation, from grasping deceiver to covenant bearer. The imagery of Bethel reverberates far beyond Jacob's life. The latter signifies connection between worlds, divine presence in human exile, and hope in the midst of fear. For Israel, centuries later, Bethel would be a place of memory, where God revealed himself to the patriarch who had fled in shame but was destined for greatness. For later generations, the latter became a metaphor of Christ himself, the bridge between heaven and earth, the embodiment of God's promise to be with his people. Jacob rose from Bethel, not yet changed in full, but marked. He carried no armies, no wealth, no allies, but he carried a promise that the God who spoke to Abraham and Isaac had spoken now to him. He carried the weight of a vow that tethered his life to the altar he had anointed. And he carried the limp of conscience, knowing that the blessing he had stolen was now shadowed by a God who still claimed him. The fugitive was no longer only a deceiver. He was also a dreamer touched by revelation. Exile had become encounter. A stone pillow had become a sacred altar. The path to Haran was no longer just a road of escape. It was a journey into transformation. And as Jacob lifted his staff and resumed his trek toward the house of Laban, he walked under the weight of both fear and promise. His brother's rage awaited him behind, his uncle's cunning awaited him ahead, but between them stretched the vision of a ladder that assured him heaven was not closed. God's purposes would not abandon him, even when he had abandoned integrity. Thus begins the next chapter, the deceiver who will himself be deceived, the hunter of blessings who will taste the sting of being hunted by craftier hands. The God of Bethel would walk with him still, shaping his flaws into faith, his exile into encounter, and his cunning into covenant. Jacob's weary journey finally brought him to the lands of the east, to a well in a field where shepherds gathered their flocks. Wells in ancient times were more than watering holes, they were crossroads of destiny, places where meetings could alter lives. And so it was with Jacob. As he inquired about his mother's family, the shepherds answered that they knew Laban, her brother. Even as they spoke, Rachel approached with her father's sheep. The moment was charged with providence. Jacob, a fugitive marked by guilt and promise, beheld Rachel, and love ignited instantly. He rolled the heavy stone from the well's mouth, an act of strength performed before watching eyes, and watered her flock. Then, overcome, he kissed her and wept aloud, announcing his kinship. What began at Bethel with a vow to God now deepened with the stirrings of human love, a bond that would shape Jacob's trials and joys for decades to come. Laban welcomed Jacob warmly, declaring, "Surely you are my own flesh and blood." Yet beneath hospitality lurked calculation. Laban was a man who knew the value of labor and the art of bargaining. Jacob offered to work 7 years for Rachel's hand in marriage, a staggering sum of devotion. But love lightened the load, for scripture records that the years seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. At last the wedding day arrived. A feast was held, the air filled with music, wine, and celebration. But in the darkness of the bridal chamber, Jacob discovered too late the hand of deception. It was not Rachel who lay beside him, but Leah, the elder sister, veiled and silent. When morning light unveiled the truth, Jacob's words to Laban burned with indignation. "What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why have you deceived me?" The irony was brutal. Jacob, who had deceived his blind father in the darkness, was now himself deceived in the darkness of his wedding night. The deceiver had become the deceived, and the cycle of trickery turned upon him. Laban's reply was steeped in custom and cunning. "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter before the elder. Finish this week with Leah, and we will give you Rachel also, in return for another 7 years of service." Thus Jacob became husband to 2 sisters, bound in rivalry that would shape the course of Israel's tribes. Leah, unloved, sought significance through bearing children. She gave Jacob Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah's sons whose names reflected her longing for affection and God's mercy upon her affliction. Rachel, beautiful yet barren, burned with envy. In desperation, she gave her maid Bilhah to Jacob, who bore Dan and Naphtali. Leah responded by offering her maid Zilpah, who bore Gad and Asher. Then Leah conceived again, adding Issachar and Zebulun. At last, after years of anguish, Rachel herself bore Joseph, the son who would later change the fate of nations. This contest of wombs was more than family drama. It was a crucible where the 12 tribes of Israel were born. Each child carried a name soaked with meaning, sometimes gratitude, sometimes desperation, sometimes rivalry. Through this complex household, God was weaving the fabric of a nation. Jacob, once a solitary fugitive with only a stone pillow, now stood as patriarch of a sprawling family destined to shape history. Yet blessings carried burdens. Jacob's preferential love for Rachel mirrored the favoritism of his own parents, repeating the pattern of division. Just as Isaac loved Esau more than Jacob, so Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah, perpetuating wounds that would later fracture his household. History seemed to echo through generations, reminding us that unresolved favoritism can birth cycles of conflict. Jacob's years in Haran also revealed a slow transformation. Though he entered as a cunning supplanter, he found himself subject to another's cunning. Laban's manipulation forced Jacob to taste the bitterness of exploitation. For 14 years he labored for the right to marry Rachel, and then 6 more to build his flock. In this crucible of servitude, Jacob's ambition was tempered by toil, and his character, though still restless, began to bend toward perseverance. Through deceit, rivalry, and hardship, God's promise pressed forward. The barren became fruitful, the unloved became mother of tribes, the deceiver learned endurance, and a fugitive became a patriarch. Jacob's household grew, but so did tension. With every birth, the rivalry between Leah and Rachel deepened. With every year, Laban's grip tightened, exploiting Jacob's labor. Yet beneath the surface, providence was at work, preparing to release Jacob from bondage and lead him back toward the land of promise. The story of Jacob in Haran is not simply a tale of love won and deception endured. It is the story of a man who reaped what he sowed, who learned through humiliation that deceit carries a price, and who discovered in toil that blessing often comes through struggle. The deceiver was being reshaped, one disappointment and one triumph at a time. But the household he had built, vast and complicated, was only the beginning. Prosperity awaited him, but so did conflict. For as Jacob's flocks grew and his family multiplied, envy would rise again, this time not from his brother, but from his uncle's sons. The stage was being set for confrontation, departure, and another desperate flight, not from Esau now, but from Laban. Time moved on in Haran, and Jacob's household multiplied. Sons filled his tents, rivalry brewed between his wives, yet prosperity seemed distant. Jacob had given 20 years of his life to Laban's service, 14 for Rachel and Leah, 6 for flocks, yet he remained a hired man, his labor enriching another. He longed for independence, for return to the land promised at Bethel. But Laban, shrewd as ever, was unwilling to let go of the blessing Jacob's presence brought. When Rachel bore Joseph, a shift stirred in Jacob's heart. He said to Laban, "Send me on my way, so I may return to my homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will go." Laban, reluctant, countered, "If I have found favor in your eyes, stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He pleaded, "Name your wages, and I will pay them." Jacob's request seemed modest, even foolish to the calculating eye. He asked only for the speckled, spotted, and dark-colored animals from the flocks, those considered less desirable. Yet beneath simplicity lay strategy, and beyond strategy, providence. Through selective breeding, and perhaps divine intervention, Jacob's herds swelled. The strong animals bore speckled offspring, while the weak bore plain-colored, leaving Laban with frailty and Jacob with strength. Wealth quietly shifted camps, unnoticed at first, but undeniable in time. Whispers began among Laban's sons, "Jacob has taken everything our father owned. All this wealth is his." Their envy mirrored Esau's old grievance, the refrain of Jacob's life: prosperity won through cunning, provoking bitterness in others. Even Laban's attitude soured. Jacob saw the change in his uncle's face, once hospitable, now cold and calculating. Then came the word of the Lord, "Return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you." The command echoed Bethel's promise. Jacob called Rachel and Leah to the fields, away from listening ears, and told them, "Your father's countenance is not what it was. Yet the God of my father has been with me. You know I served your father with all my strength, but he cheated me, changing my wages 10 times. Still God did not allow him to harm me." He recounted a dream in which the angel of God showed him speckled rams mounting the flock, declaring, "I have seen all that Laban has done to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and return to your native land." Rachel and Leah, daughters who had themselves tasted their father's manipulation, agreed, "Do we still have any portion in our father's house? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Surely all the wealth God has taken from our father belongs to us and our children. Do whatever God has told you." Their consent was not merely loyalty to Jacob, but bitterness toward Laban, who had sold them like property and devoured their bride price. So Jacob acted swiftly. While Laban was away shearing sheep, Jacob gathered his wives, children, servants, and possessions. He set them upon camels and drove away his flocks. But secrecy clouded the departure, for Rachel stole her father's household gods, small idols of inheritance and protection. Her motives remained shrouded, perhaps defiance, perhaps superstition, perhaps a claim to legitimacy. Whatever her intent, the theft deepened the rupture between Jacob and Laban. 3 days later, word reached Laban that Jacob had fled. Enraged, he pursued with kinsmen, catching up in the hill country of Gilead. The stage seemed set for confrontation, yet divine intervention altered the course. In the night, God appeared to Laban in a dream. "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." When Laban overtook him, his words were a blend of grievance and restraint. "What have you done, deceiving me and carrying off my daughters like captives? Why did you not tell me, so I could send you away with joy and song? You did not even let me kiss my grandchildren and daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you, but last night the God of your father said, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob.' Jacob defended himself with passion. 'I was afraid, for I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. For 20 years I served you your ewes, and she-goats never miscarried. I bore the loss of what was torn by beasts. I endured scorching heat by day and cold by night. 14 years for your daughters, 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac, had not been with me, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and rebuked you last night." The search for the idols turned into a theater of tension. Laban rummaged through tents, unaware that Rachel sat upon the gods, feigning the excuse of a woman's cycle to avoid rising. Thus the idols remained hidden, the search fruitless, and the confrontation unresolved. At last, both men knew endless conflict would only consume them. So they raised a heap of stones as a witness between them. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha in Aramaic. Jacob called it Galeed in Hebrew, both meaning heap of witness. They agreed not to cross the boundary with hostile intent, sealing peace with sacrifice and oath. At dawn, Laban kissed his daughters and grandchildren and returned home, leaving Jacob free. Jacob departed not as a servant, but as a patriarch, leading his wives, children, and vast herds. The deceiver had outlasted the deceiver. Yet ahead lay a greater trial. For beyond the hills of Gilead stretched the land of his fathers and the brother he had wronged, who now approached with 400 men. Freedom from Laban did not mean peace. As Jacob moved his household toward Canaan, messengers returned with news that froze his blood. Esau was coming to meet him, and with him 400 men. The memory of Esau's cry for vengeance, uttered years earlier, thundered back. Jacob, once a fugitive with only a staff, was now a patriarch with wives, children, and herds, yet the past still stalked him. Fear gripped him, and strategy took over. He divided his people into two camps, thinking, if Esau comes and attacks one, the other may escape. But human tactics could not silence the dread in his soul. So Jacob turned to prayer, a rare moment of humility. O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, you who said to me, return to your country and your relatives, and I will prosper you. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I fear him, that he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with the children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and make your descendants like the sand of the sea, too numerous to count. This was not the voice of the deceiver bargaining, but of a man clinging to promises greater than himself. Still, Jacob prepared gifts for Esau: goats, camels, cattle, donkeys sent ahead in successive droves to appease him. It was both strategy and supplication, a gesture of submission laced with fear. Yet the true battle would not be with Esau's men, but with God himself. That night, at the ford of the Jabbok, Jacob sent his wives, children, and possessions across the stream. Alone at last, he faced the silence of night. And then mystery. A man appeared and wrestled with him until daybreak. No words, no explanation, only struggle. The text offers no prelude, as if the battle emerged from Jacob's very soul. He had striven with brother, father, uncle, and himself. Now he wrestled with God. The clash was fierce. Neither overpowered the other, yet at last the man touched Jacob's hip, wrenching it from its socket. Pain seared his body, but Jacob clung all the tighter. Let me go, for it is daybreak, the figure demanded. Jacob, wounded yet unyielding, gasped, I will not let you go unless you bless me. These words marked the turning point. No longer was Jacob seizing blessings through deceit. He was begging for one through brokenness. What is your name? The man asked. Jacob, he answered, the name of the supplanter, the grasping heel holder. Then came the declaration that redefined his identity. Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. With that, the deceiver became Israel, the one who contends with God. The blessing was given, but it came with a wound. As the sun rose, Jacob limped away, forever marked by the touch of the divine. His limp testified to a new reality. Strength is not in cunning or schemes, but in clinging to God even in weakness. The dawn also brought the moment he had dreaded for 20 years. Esau approached with his men. Jacob ordered his family in sequence: maids and children first, Leah and her children next, Rachel and Joseph last, yet he himself went ahead, bowing to the ground 7 times as he neared his brother. Each bow was a confession of guilt, a plea for mercy, an acknowledgement that reconciliation was not in his hands. Then came the surprise that no scheme could have anticipated. Esau ran to meet him, embraced him, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him. Both brothers wept. The years of bitterness, the stolen blessing, the plotted murder all melted in the warmth of reconciliation. The gifts Jacob had sent were pressed upon Esau, who at first refused, saying, I have enough, my brother. But Jacob insisted, please accept my present, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you have received me favorably. The two parted in peace. Esau returned to Seir, Jacob to Succos. The brother once feared as executioner had become a reconciler, and Jacob's limp was a constant reminder that God had transformed him before reconciling him. The narrative of the Jabbok wrestle is more than an ancient mystery. It reveals the essence of transformation. Blessing often comes through struggle, identity is reshaped through wounding, and reconciliation with others is preceded by wrestling with God. Jacob's limp slowed his stride but quickened his spirit, anchoring him to the truth that the promise was never his to steal, it was always God's to give. Thus, with a new name and a reconciled brother, Jacob walked into the next stage of his life. Yet peace was fragile. Within his household and within Canaan, storms still brewed. The deceiver-turned-patriarch had more trials ahead, trials that would expose not only his faith, but also the character of his children, the future tribes of Israel. Jacob's return to Canaan might have seemed the closing of a circle, but peace rarely comes without disturbance. He pitched his tents near Shechem, bought land, and for a moment it looked as if stability had finally embraced him. Yet in Shechem, tragedy struck. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, went out to visit the women of the land. Shechem, the son of Hamor, seized and violated her. What began as an assault turned into an offer of marriage, but no marriage could erase the stain of dishonor. Jacob heard, but remained silent until his sons returned from the fields. Silence, in this moment, was not strength but paralysis. Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, simmered with rage. When Hamor and Shechem approached with proposals of union offering circumcision for their men to join Jacob's family, the brothers concealed vengeance under the cloak of agreement. On the third day, while the men of the city still reeled in pain, Simeon and Levi descended with swords, killing every male and rescuing Dinah. The act was brutal, and Jacob recoiled in horror. "You have brought trouble on me," he told his sons, "by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people of this land. We are few in number. If they join forces against me, I and my household will be destroyed." For Jacob, the massacre jeopardized survival. For Simeon and Levi, it was justice. The tension revealed a household divided not just by rivalry among wives, but by contrasting visions of honor and survival. Into this turmoil, God spoke again, "Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar to God, who appeared to you when you fled from Esau." Jacob obeyed, but not without cleansing. He told his household, "Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, purify yourselves, and change your clothes." Rachel's hidden idols from Laban's house, charms collected along the way, all were buried under an oak at Shechem. The family that once lived fractured by deceit now stood together in purification. At Bethel, Jacob built an altar and called the place El Bethel, the God of Bethel, because it was there God revealed himself when Jacob fled. Once again God appeared, reaffirming the covenant. "Your name is Jacob, but you will not be called Jacob any longer. Your name will be Israel." He repeated the promise of fruitfulness, nations, and kings. Bethel became a hinge in Jacob's life, the point where exile was truly over and destiny was reaffirmed. Yet blessing did not shield him from pain. On the road from Bethel to Ephrath, Rachel went into hard labor. The cries of childbirth soon mingled with cries of death. As she breathed her last, she named her son Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow. Jacob, stricken, renamed him Benjamin, son of the right hand. Rachel's death shattered Jacob, for she had been the love of his youth, the one for whom he labored 14 years. He buried her on the way to Bethlehem, and set up a pillar over her tomb, a marker that stands in memory, even generations later. Sorrow upon sorrow followed. Reuben, Jacob's firstborn by Leah, committed a grievous sin by sleeping with Bilhah, Rachel's maid and Jacob's concubine. Scripture records only the stark fact, but the implications were devastating. Authority in the household was fractured, and Reuben's act would one day cost him his inheritance. The pattern of rivalry and violation that haunted Jacob's family deepened its scars. At last Jacob returned to Hebron, where Isaac still lived. There the circle closed. Father and son, long estranged, now dwelt in proximity until Isaac's death at 180 years. Esau and Jacob came together once more to bury their father, a brief reunion in the shadow of grief. Yet the story pressed forward beyond burial. The household Jacob carried now formed the foundation of tribes. Each son bore not just a name, but a destiny: Judah, from whom kings would come. Levi, destined for priesthood. Joseph, beloved yet envied, whose dreams would soon provoke betrayal. The chaos of Jacob's household mirrored the chaos of nations, but in it God's promise advanced, shaping flawed people into instruments of covenant. Jacob had wrestled with God, reconciled with Esau, survived Laban's deceit, endured Dinah's tragedy, buried Rachel, and mourned Isaac. He had built altars and dug graves, raised sons and buried peace. His life stood as a paradox: blessed yet broken, chosen yet chastened. And the story was not finished. For even as he laid his father to rest, a new storm was forming. Joseph, the son of his old age, beloved and adorned with a special coat, would soon become the focus of jealousy so fierce that brothers would betray blood. Through that betrayal, God would once again turn human failure into divine purpose, guiding Jacob's family into Egypt, where sorrow and salvation would entwine. Jacob's household, scarred by rivalry and grief, now turned its gaze toward a single figure, Joseph, the son of Rachel, born in Jacob's old age. Israel loved him more than all his other sons, and he made for Joseph an ornate robe, a garment that blazed as a symbol of favoritism. The robe, long-sleeved and richly colored, set Joseph apart, and the hearts of his brothers darkened with jealousy. Favoritism, the old family wound, erupted once again. Joseph's dreams stoked the fire. In one, his brothers' sheaves of grain bowed to his. In another, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed before him. He recounted these dreams with the innocence of youth, but to his brothers they sounded like arrogance, the boast of a dreamer who presumed dominion. Even Jacob rebuked him, though he quietly pondered the meaning. The robe and the dreams together formed a dangerous spark. One day, when Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers in the fields near Shechem, they saw him coming from afar. "Here comes the dreamer," they sneered. Their hatred crystallized into a plot. "Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall see what becomes of his dreams." Only Reuben, the eldest, intervened. He persuaded them not to shed blood, urging instead that Joseph be thrown into a cistern, hoping to rescue him later. But when a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passed by, Judah proposed a different scheme. "What profit is there if we kill our brother? Come, let us sell him." And so Joseph was sold for 20 shekels of silver, led away toward Egypt, his cries swallowed by desert winds. The brothers slaughtered a goat, dipped Joseph's robe in blood, and carried it to their father. Jacob recognized it at once. His cry pierced the air, "It is my son's robe, a fierce animal has devoured him." Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. He tore his garments, donned sackcloth, and mourned many days. No words of comfort from sons or daughters could reach him. His grief was inconsolable. "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." Thus the deceiver who once stained his father's heart with lies now tasted the bitterness of being deceived by his own children. Years passed, and famine came upon the land. Jacob learned that grain could be found in Egypt and sent his sons to buy food except Benjamin, Rachel's last child, whom he refused to risk. In Egypt, Joseph, now governor, recognized his brothers, though they did not recognize him. He detained Simeon and demanded Benjamin's presence as proof of honesty. When the brothers returned with this demand, Jacob resisted bitterly. "Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. Everything is against me." Yet hunger pressed harder than grief, and at last Judah pledged his own life as surety. With trembling, Jacob released Benjamin. The second journey ended with revelation. Joseph, unable to restrain himself, wept before his brothers and declared, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" The shock melted into fear, but Joseph spoke comfort. "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. He sent word for Jacob, 'God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not delay.'" When Jacob's sons returned with the news, his heart faltered. He could not believe it until he saw the carts Joseph had sent. Then his spirit revived. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." That night, God appeared to him in a vision at Beersheba. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go with you, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." The reunion was overwhelming. Joseph rode out in his chariot, embraced his father, and wept for a long time. Jacob whispered words that mingled relief with readiness. "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." In Egypt, Jacob lived his final 17 years in Goshen, a fertile land where his family prospered. He blessed Pharaoh, acknowledging the hardships of his 130 years, but also testifying to God's sustaining hand. His days, though marked by sorrow, closed in peace. As death approached, Jacob adopted Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, as his own, granting them tribal inheritance. In a symbolic act, he crossed his hands, giving the younger Ephraim the greater blessing, echoing the pattern of his own life where the younger rose above the elder. Then he gathered his 12 sons, pronouncing words of prophecy and destiny blessings, warnings, and promises that shaped Israel's tribes. Finally, he commanded, "Bury me with my fathers in the cave of Machpelah, near Hebron, where Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah and Leah lie." With these words, he drew his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Joseph wept over him, and Egypt mourned 70 days. A grand procession carried him back to Canaan, where his sons laid him in the ancestral tomb. Jacob's story closed where it began in the land of promise. Yet his legacy endured, not in cunning or deception, but in the nation that bore his new name, Israel. His life was a tapestry of struggle and blessing, deceit and reconciliation, loss and restoration. Through every wound and failure, God's hand guided him, shaping him into the patriarch of a people whose destiny stretched beyond his own years. Jacob's limp remained the symbol of his journey, broken yet blessed, wounded yet chosen. His story stands as proof that divine purpose is not thwarted by human flaw, and that even through deception, exile, grief, and reconciliation, God weaves redemption.